the reality is there are times where you just have to take an action to understand what's going on so that you can then maybe take a more correct action later. But the only thing that's going to tell you whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent is by taking that first action.
Well, welcome to the True Man Podcast. You know, I feel like I'm reminded daily how important it is to live life for today because we are, of course, not promised tomorrow. You know, some people like to stretch that to the limit. Now, many times, not of their own choosing, of course. So today's guest has a story like that, and I'm excited to share with you. I'm excited to share this story with you because if one chance at life isn't enough, a second chance certainly is. So welcome to the True Man Podcast, good friend Scott Schilling. Now, Scott is known as the Authentic Connector and has over 40 plus years of coaching, sales, and marketing experience. He's presented to over 3,000 live events, sharing the stage with people like Jack Canfield, Les Brown, and Stephen Forbes. He's authored the book, That Sucks, What Now? Real World Solutions for Getting Through What You're Going Through. I recommend that one. And his latest offering is a co-authoring in the book, Second Chances from Surviving to Thriving. Now, finally, Scott makes True Man history here today, our first Iowa Hawkeye on the show. Scott Schilling, welcome to the True Man Podcast.
It's about time. Go Hawks.
Yeah. I've been threatening to get Scott on the show for a while. Full disclosure, and I've told Scott this, you know, my all-time fave is Bobby Hansen, but, you know, and maybe someday we'll get Bobby Hansen on the show. Scott, you got any pull there?
You know, Bobby and I knew each other back in the day, back there at Iowa. So who knows? Maybe.
I'd love that. Scott, you know, you had this book coming out, Second Chances. And I gravitate towards titles like that because I love comeback stories. I love hearing about people's second chances in life. And, you know, just because I think that is so motivating, but in particular, because my audience tends to be men and they need to be motivated. I think it's that much more because it's like, well, if he can overcome what he's overcome in his life, maybe I can, you know, be a little vulnerable and take action on what's holding me back. So Scott, tell us a little bit about your story and how you found yourself in a book called Second Chances.
Well, it's interesting. You know, I think as men, you know, we don't ask for advice and we don't ask for a lot of different things, support, help, whatever. I went off to a speaking event. It was a particularly cold day here in Dallas. We don't get all that many of those, but it was really, really cold. And I balanced a box of books on my knee, went to the back of my SUV, and I flipped open the back hatch and I threw it up pretty hard because everything was pretty stiff, right? You know, because it was cold. And then I ducked underneath it to put the box in the back. Well, the only thing that didn't work were the cylinders that were supposed to hold up that back deck. So as I threw it up, it came back down as fast as I threw it up and hit me in the back of the head. I mean, it cold cocked me, just about knocked me out, and literally seeing stars. Well, what I didn't know is it actually dissected the PICA, the posterior interior cerebellar artery in my brain. You know, I had a massive headache. But you know, I also had to go on. I had a speaking event I had to do, so I went and did it. Well, then I had a headache. I was going out to an infomercial shoot out in LA, and that was 4 days later, and I had the headache for 4 straight days. But of course, Brainiac here got on an airplane and decided to go up at altitude and really test my brain and see.
We got to tough it out, Scott. We got to tough it out.
Yeah. And it didn't feel good. Let me just tell you. But you know, going up into altitude or coming back down. And then we were doing the infomercial shoot and doing all that. Well, we came upon a Sunday, and we decided to take the day off, go to the Angelus Temple to hear Matthew Barnett and all the wonderful praise that he was doing at the Angelus Temple in LA. And then he invited us to go to the Dream Center, which is the old Rampart Hospital, for those of you mature enough to remember Emergency 51, when they'd say, Rampart, we're coming in. They actually bought Rampart Hospital and converted it. And there were 734 former pimps, hookers, drug dealers, drug addicted, all in a 1-year discipleship program living in there. So we went and toured the Dream Center. And we went up on top on the roof to get a picture overlooking this area that this project had cleaned up in inner city Watts. And it was just amazing, the story, the spirit, everything that was about it. But as we were standing on top getting a picture taken, we were looking back at the sun, and it was like there was an ice pick going through my right eye. I mean, it was miserable. And we decided something wasn't right. I was just feeling off. Again, I had a headache for 8 days now. So we went off to have lunch at Universal City Walk. We were going to go to Bubba Gump's and get us some shrimp. And we got off the shuttle, and I probably walked about 10 yards, and my leg stopped. And I looked down at my right foot, and I said, move, and it said no. And I looked down at my left foot, and I said, move, and it said no. And I realized I was on 2 tingling stumps from just above the knees down. I started getting disoriented. Fortunately, there was a railing behind me. I was walking with 7 people, 3 of them doctors. Coincidence? I think not. One of them slid a chair underneath me as I started to fall back. I fell into the chair. Another one spun around, and he said, Scott, what's your phone number? And I said, 817-239. Why would you be asking me that now? Can't you see I can't walk? Oh, no reason. Well, there was a reason. I was cold. I was gray. I was clammy. I was sweating profusely. 4 out of the 5 symptoms of being in the middle of a major stroke. And I was having a cerebellar stroke. And for anybody who doesn't understand what the cerebellum controls, speech, memory, fine motor skills, walking, talking, vertigo, by the grace of God, I come through it all with no deficiencies. And so we went to the emergency room, 5 hours of all sorts of different tests, and they misdiagnosed it and released me with a major migraine. And so literally I went back to the hotel, and I felt like my head was going to blow off.
Yeah.
And the pain was so bad, I was laying in bed, and I finally cried out, God help. And I heard an audible, drop to your knees. And so I did. I slid out of bed, had my elbows up on the bed, and I started praying. And I prayed, Lord, I've been teaching your plan and timing is perfect for the last couple of years now. I do not pretend to understand this plan or this timing. I don't believe your plan is to call me home. And I don't believe your plan is to maim me or disable me. So I'm choosing to believe your plan is to wake me up. Duly noted, you got my attention. And I'm supposed to use this event to serve and save myself and others physically and spiritually for the rest of my life. And if that's your will for my life, I ask for your wisdom and guidance going forward so I can implement that appropriately. And if that's not your will for my life, I just want you to know whatever you got for me, I'm good with. And I went to climb back into bed, and I actually climbed up on a cloud. Total peace. I've never felt it before, never felt it since. No pain. Fell straight asleep. Woke up the next morning, went on set, shot 3 infomercial segments, 53 minutes, 18 minutes, 14 minutes. And they suggested I go to a different neurologist. He did an MRI. His first words, get your ass to the hospital, check into ICU. You've had a stroke. And then I spent 6 days in intensive care.
What's going through your mind when you're in intensive care, Scott?
Well, it actually started when the doc said that to me. All of a sudden, I felt like a China doll. I felt very breakable at that point. And so I got into intensive care, and the doctors were looking at the MRI, and I could hear them outside my room talking. They said, "We don't understand why this guy's alive." And they kept on saying that. And they said, "We've got 2 other stroke patients on the floor. Their MRI is not nearly as bad as his. They're both totally incapacitated. They're in deep trouble. And here he is. He's in there laughing, joking, goofing off with us." And I got to tell you, when you make it through something like that, first of all, and then you hear people sitting there saying, "He's not supposed to be alive." But they kept on saying it.
Yeah.
And so
It's
finally,
like they're trying to convince themselves. Right?
well, exactly. They walked in and they said, "We just don't understand why you're alive." And I said, "Sorry to disappoint you. I've always been an overachiever. I lived." And they said, "You seem like kind of a smart butt." And I said, "Well, no, I got it all figured out." And they said, "Okay, what is it?" I said, "It's obvious. It's God's grace, mercy, and favor on my life."
Yeah.
And they went, "Well, that's as good an answer as we got." And they walked out. And the reality is, that is the answer. It was that I was saved. I take zero credit for that. But it's the lessons you learn through going through all this that become so exceptional.
What lesson do you feel like you've walked away from that event with?
Well, it's not lesson, it's
Lesson.
lessons. I mean, it's everything from understanding that, the medical community does the best they can with what
Yeah.
they know. And sometimes there are things past what they know. So that's one thing. The other side is, they try to throw what they know at you. I mean, all of a sudden I went from no medications to 7 medications.
Right.
And I wasn't a fan of that. But they were insisting that's what had to be done. The good news is probably after 90 or 100 days, I got off them all. I refused to take them anymore. I said, I'm not going to do that. But the other lessons you learn is that, we've got an amazing God. And I truly believe, a shot was fired across the bow.
Mm.
I had made a declaration to God September 29th, 2012. And I said, I'm done being a hired gun, except for 3 things: sharing messages of hope and inspiration, teaching and training others to do the same, and building your kingdom. Do you understand? Other than that, I'm done. Well, I made the declaration, but I don't know that I did a great job of following it. And I don't know, I'm not going to say that the incident was done specifically to wake me up, but it might have been done specifically to wake me up. I mean, because the vast majority of people that suffer a cerebellar stroke come out one of 2 ways: not living or with significant deficiencies.
Yeah.
Meaning not being able to speak, not being able to walk, not being able to use half of their body, and I come out with 0 deficiencies. So much so that I was on stage 23 days later sharing the story. Now, that doesn't happen typically.
Yeah.
And so when something like that is so demonstrative, it really is, it's way past my pay grade.
Yeah.
There's only one answer for it in my mind.
Well, yeah, talk about that a little bit more, Scott, because there are people out there, they question faith, they question miracles, they question God's hand in things. You and I know that that's just kind of false way of living. That God has a hand in everything, and talk about how you feel like God's had a hand in your healing and and moving you forward to do kingdom building work.
Well, it's really when I got out of intensive care, they wouldn't let me get on an airplane and fly back.
Yeah,
They
right.
didn't, because the dissection was still there.
Right.
They weren't able to go in and fix it. They just identified it. And so it was still there. And so the first thing we had to do is just sit for a while, a few weeks, until they felt comfortable with me being able to fly home and get to a different neurologist, actually. And so I started looking up things like, as a professional speaker, how long do I have to wait after a cerebellar stroke to get back on stage? You
Does
can ask.
Google actually have an answer to that?
It actually did, believe it or not. But the answer was, most people that have a cerebellar stroke either don't make it through, or they lose a significant ability to speak, so therefore they never regain their professional career.
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't the answer I wanted to see.
No.
And so I said, well, let me give it an easier question. How long after a cerebellar stroke do you have to wait till you can drive again? And it said, most people with a cerebellar stroke lose functionality on at least half of their body, and by doing so, they lose their ability to drive. Well, that's not the answer I wanted to see. And so that's what really spurred writing the book, That Sucks, What Now? And it's That Sucks, What Now? Real world solutions for getting through what you're going through. And most people who know me, they go, you don't think that title's a negative? Well, it's not. That sucks. I wish it wouldn't have happened that way.
Yeah.
What now? No time to sit around and cry over spilt milk. Time to go fix it. So that's what really That Sucks, What Now is all about. I wanted to, if anybody was fortunate enough to come through like I was, I wanted to give people the encouragement that there's full life on the other side. I mean, you can get back to exactly what you were doing and then some. And what I realized, it was interesting, once I finished the book, I actually realized what the theme of the book was. And it wasn't until a while, even after doing that I was at an event and I handed this woman the book, and she goes, well, what's it about? And, we were trying to be quiet. So instead of talking to her, I wrote it out, and I wrote, God's plan and timing is perfect, with a plus sign. All things work together for my good, with an equal sign. Total peace. When you put those two things together, you achieve total peace. God's plan and timing is perfect. I didn't understand when it was happening, why it was happening. So you tend to question that. But when you add all things work together for my good, notice it doesn't say all things are good. It says all things work together for my good. When you put those two together in a math equation, what you really come down to is total peace. And so you're able to get through that event and go, it doesn't really matter if I know why this has happened. It has. Here's what I've learned from it. Here's what I can carry forward to serve people with it. 23 days later, I was at an event, a Christian men's group here in Dallas. It had been scheduled for months. And interestingly enough, the topic was that I had given them like 4 months earlier, man plans and God laughs. And so the first thing I did when I walked up to start speaking is I said, Well, the good news is the title is the same. The other news is the content is totally different.
Yeah.
And so I was able to share, and I said, guys, when your car attacks you and you have a headache for 8 days, they call that a clue. Go to the doctor. And right after that talk, I had a gentleman walk up to me and he said, "Thank you so much." And I said, "Awesome. What got to you?" He said, "Oh, I'm heading to the doctor right now. I've had a headache for 12 days." And so if that's the only person I affected, here's this God-fearing man
Yeah.
who had a headache for 12 days that said, "That's it. I'm going." And now we've been friends for many years, ever since that day.
It's really incredible how God brings people together. And what's interesting to me, Scott, I've heard you tell your story, and we've experienced my wife's father earlier this year experienced a stroke. He's doing well. Is he back to where he was? No. So you just, we were, in my mind, I saw a man walk into the hospital that I knew, and I saw a man come out of the hospital that not so much
Yeah.
anymore, just life changing. So thankful, thankful that God is giving you the gift that he's given you. But short of having a light life event like that, so many people walk around in chaos. Just this life of just going on all the time. What would your advice to be to these people that allow themselves to live in this chaos and not experience total peace? Because ultimately, that's really, to me, what I've experienced myself. That's really what we're searching for.
Well, that's what again became so intriguing to me, because I had written the book with the intention of sharing quality information and some different processes and things that I had used and been through. But it wasn't until it was really funny. I always talked about, it's about God's plan and timing. And I
Yeah.
always talked about all things work together for my good. But I had never, the day that I wrote that as an equation, it just was almost overpowering. It was like, this is how you do this. Oh my goodness. Like, it's been in front of my eyes. I wrote this, and I didn't necessarily realize it to that magnitude. And what was so amazing about that was the being able to write that and have this woman read it. And again, I had known her for a few minutes, and all of a sudden she looked over and went, "Wow, you're right. You're right." And it flipped a switch in her mind immediately. And I think that's the biggest thing that I work to share with people these days is, if you can put those two things together, you're going to live a far more peaceful life. Can we understand what's going on in the Middle East today? Not in the least. Number one, we're not there. Number two, we're probably not closely associated with either party. So it's hard to say, how is that God's plan and timing? And so you tend to question. But again, when you say all things work together for good, maybe, unfortunately, it took a little stupidity to get people to put down arms and talk and come together as humanity.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but and again, I don't think any of us do. But the fact is, I think if we understand that it's not all that hard to add positive impotence, to make positive impact in the world. I say it a lot. How many of you know how to smile? Well, if you can smile at somebody, you've just impacted two lives positively, them and you. And if everybody would do more of that, things would be better. I'm convinced of that. So again, I think you don't have to go through a major life event, and hopefully you never have that experience. But I can tell you, if you're not grateful coming through one, you got a real problem because you're a really slow learner. I learned I'm allergic to lightning. I don't need any more lessons.
Well, it's funny to me, Scott, because I think people have this idea that nothing bad is ever going to happen to them, and I don't really feel like we're that far away from somebody that we either know or is a family member where something weird isn't going on. So to me, it seems much closer than people want to believe it is. I mean, just bad stuff happening. So I in my mind, I go, gosh, I don't understand why you wouldn't want to be right with God, and have a plan or a declaration for your life laid out. And listen, I'm the first one to admit, I know it's not easy. The last couple of years, trying to build this true man community, this true man brand, it's been a huge challenge, absolutely huge challenge. But to me, like, I won't back down from it because I really feel like God has called me into this. To what reason? I don't fully know at this point, but I do fully embrace, and I thank him daily for entrusting me with building, this true man community. And I work my tail off on a daily basis to try to make that happen. And I just can't imagine why other people float around in life thinking that there's a better way, but yet they do.
Well, there's sometimes perception that there's an easier way. And,
oh boy.
Yeah, really. I mean, I don't necessarily think it is. I've had the same thing. Once you live through something like this, there's a lot of seeking and searching.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, you can't help but wonder, okay, you saved me. What do you got for me? And for me, I think there's only two answers in life, and that's hell yes and hell no. And hell no doesn't get you anywhere. So therefore, for me, there's been a lot of, oh, this was brought into my life. Let's explore this. And it has not exactly, I mean, I've had multiple situations not exactly work out the way I thought they were going to work out.
Yeah.
Well, the reality is, did I learn something from it? Every time. Did I meet some amazing people through it? Every time. Are they stepping stones? Every time. There's a pretty good book that says the steps of the righteous are perfectly ordered. But it doesn't say what the order is, and it doesn't say what each step is. And you know what I'm saying? Is so I look at it as, I get questioned from time to time. Why did you get involved in that project? Why did you stay there as long as you did?
Yeah.
Why didn't you blah, blah, blah? Well, I don't think anybody ever purposefully does things they're not supposed to. I think they're working to make things the best they can possibly make it. And so I see all those, somebody asked me on a radio show one time, what's your greatest failure? And I said, I haven't had one. And they said, oh, are you saying things have never gone wrong? I said, I didn't say that. I've had a lot of things go wrong. I've had a lot of things go as not planned. But quite frankly, I don't look at those things as failures, because if I'm moving toward what I truly believe to be the goal, all of those things become learning events. It's one of the reasons when I'm talking to my coaching clients, I say if something happens to them, I suggest that they ask themselves 5 questions about the situation. What was the lesson? What was the gift? What did you do to create it? How would you modify it next time to make it better? How's this going to serve you the rest of your life? So even in the situation of my stroke, right? I go out to my car, I balance a box of books on my knee, I get hit in the back of the head. What was the lesson? If you have a headache for 8 straight days, go to the doctor.
Yeah.
What's the gift? That I'm still alive and able to talk about it. What did I do to create it? Well, I might have been a little careless, throwing the back hatch up a little too fast, ducking under it a little too soon, not paying closer attention because I might have been a little late. How would I modify it next time? Sell the vehicle. Don't ever keep one that attacks you. No, just be more cautious. How's this going to serve you the rest of your life? Gosh, it served me so many ways. I've been able to help a guy who had a headache for 12 days go to the doctor. I've been able to find greater purpose in my life. I've been able to help other people find greater purpose in their life. I've been able to share the story in the new book, Second Chances from Surviving to Thriving, along with 22 other authors that have had near death or been dead and come back stories. You talk about the rising phoenix. Oh my goodness. So the point is, if you ask those 5 questions, everything simply becomes a learning event. And to me, failure only exists when a 4-letter word comes up called quit. We're in this life, we're going to be off course far more than we're ever on course. It's not about being off course. It's about being off course less often, less far. But the only way you can know if you're even on course or off course is by taking action, creating some movement, gaining some feedback, and then you can evaluate where you are. The only way to do it is take action.
Yeah, and I think part of this is slowing down, right? Slowing down to ask those questions, because it's just funny to me. We live in such a microwave society. It's like boom, 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 boom. Everything's so doggone fast. And it feels like we want answers equally as fast. That's just simply not how life works. It just, like, at least what I've learned, and I don't know that I've even come close to mastering this for sure, but it's like, if I can just slow down to listen, slow down to have some identifying questions to ask myself, like you presented, that I can come up with the answers a lot more clearly than flipping on the news and having them tell me how they think things are going. But that's not what's going on out there. I mean, am I crazy, Scott? Doesn't it feel like that this herd mentality of people right now, of really trying to find their purpose, really trying to dig in and slow down and understand, does it, I don't want to say it's lost. It feels different right now to me as I talk with people. Like they bought into the chaos enough that they can't slow down to figure things out.
Well, I think that there's certainly a certain portion of society that has done that. And I think that there's a portion of society that is purposely trying to impart that on people.
Right.
So, if you think back to biblical times, I think there was probably a group that kind of followed for a period of time until there was a new awakening and a new awareness. And I think the one thing that, sometimes, and I hate it, but sometimes it's got to get bad before you get sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah.
And it would be so much better if we would just not have to get the stick, and that the jockey doesn't have to whip us, that we would just go do it. But we unfortunately, many people fall into complacency about so many different things in their lives. I've gained and lost 2,000 pounds in my life. I wish I just had half of that.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe a little exaggeration, but the reality is, I've been as fit as I've ever been in my life, and I've been as less fit than I've ever been in my life. Well, why do you go from one to the other? One is better. There's all sorts of reasons why we take our eye off the ball. It's not a matter of taking your eye off the ball. It's a matter of putting your eye back on the ball and saying, hey, okay, let's modify that. Let's get back to a better place. There's story after story after story that every one of us can share about you had it really cooking and you stopped doing what you did to get it cooking. Well, why'd you stop? Think about it. All sorts of little examples. What if you put a pot of water on a flame and it was 80 degrees and all of a sudden the pot goes to boiling? Obviously, it's gotten to 212 degrees. But then you turn off the heat. It stops boiling. Well, but if you want boiling, why don't you keep the heat on? There's so many different examples of how people go back and forth and don't stay on track, which quite frankly is good for us as coaches.
Well,
because it's one of the things that we help remind people about.
Yeah.
And again, I'd rather do something else, but it is. I had a client one day that just said, I'm stuck. I said, good, move. She goes, no, you don't understand. I'm stuck. I said, no, I totally understand. Move. And she goes, no, really, I'm stuck. And I said, I know, really, move. She goes, what are you saying? I said, can you feel your right foot? She said, yeah. I said, move it. She goes, okay, I did. I said, great, you're not stuck. Sometimes you just have to move because there's no way of getting feedback until you do.
Oh, yeah. No, 100%. I say this a lot, and I guess I say it in hopes that I will listen at some point, right? It's about being in action. Moving is about being in action. And it's one of the things, I'm sure you see this a lot in a lot of the sales training that you do. I had some success. I had some highs and lows in my sales career, right? And the highs were a result of me taking action. The lows were a result of me doing nothing. It's pretty clear. The beautiful thing about sales and marketing is typically the numbers are right there for you to take a look at.
That's the scorekeeping.
Yeah. So
the reality is there are times where you just have to take an action to understand what's going on so that you can then maybe take a more correct action later. But the only thing that's going to tell you whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent is by taking that first action. And I think, people think that there's only fight or flight, but we've actually been programmed with fight, flight, or freeze. And freeze is actually the most hazardous. Fight, put up your dukes. I'm ready to go after you. Flight, I'm going to run away from it. Okay. But freeze is, I'm going to stand here and do nothing and hope it passes by. And, if you're frozen in the wrong place, you might just get your butt run over.
Yeah. It's probably pretty likely. Pretty likely.
Yeah.
Now, Scott, before we leave today, speaking of any Iowa Hawkeye football stories you'd like to share with us before you leave?
There are many.
Give me a good one. What's your favorite Hawkeye football story?
Well, I'll give you one on myself. It's one of my favorite life lessons from Coach Hayden Fry. As a kicker punter, at the end of practice, we used to take the entire team and we would start at the 25 in the center of the field and we'd kick a field goal. And then we'd race to the right hash at the 30 and kick, and then go to the middle at 35 and kick, and go to the left hash at 40 and kick. And we'd serpentine back and forth. And the last kick, and anyway, so it ended up being 8 kicks, and I drilled 8 kicks right down the pipe, good between the goalpost. And the last one was from 55 at the angle from the right side, drilled it right down the pipe. And Coach Fry kind of chewed my butt after every kick. And, here I am. I just drilled 8 kicks in a row in this really fast-paced event. And, of course, at 19 years old, you're fairly stupid. And I spun around and I said, Coach, I don't get it. I just drilled 8 kicks right down the pipe, 8 in a row, and you have chewed my butt after every one of them. What gives? And he just looked at me with his Hayden Fry style, said, son, don't concern yourself when I'm chewing your butt. Only concern yourself when I stop, because then I don't give an S.
I can so see Hayden Fry saying that.
It was such a, it's a life. Oh, I see. So, what's the life lesson? Don't concern yourself when people are, working to share to try to make you better. Concern yourself if they're not willing to invest in you, because then they don't care anymore. And like I said, it was one of the greatest life lessons. To this day. I carry the life lessons that I learned playing football at Iowa with Coach Fry. I'll give you another really quick one. So I grew up in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. That is a suburb of Milwaukee. And I knew 100% I would always play football at Wisconsin. I just knew it. Our high school uniforms looked just like
that. Choice. You made a good choice.
Right? Well, I always knew I was going to play at Wisconsin. The only person who didn't know that is Coach John Jardine at Wisconsin, who said, son, you are not good enough to play in the Big Ten. Now, I got to tell you, that stung a little bit. And it was about that same time that I realized there were at least 2 people that believed in me and God. Because God wouldn't have put that vision on my heart if I wasn't going to fulfill it. Well, it was about that time that the University of Iowa called and said, we've heard about you and we want you to come to Iowa, but we've got a little challenge. We don't have any scholarships left. But if you walk on and you perform the way we've heard you can, you will earn one. And again, there were 2 people that believed in me. So I walked on at Iowa and turned down other scholarship offers. Well, after that first season, I not only earned my scholarship, I earned the starting spot over 3 existing scholarship players. See, what I really learned is sometimes you just got to have want to.
Yeah.
And I had want to. And that became another one of those life lessons. Have you ever been told you're not good enough, not fast enough, not big enough, not small enough, not pretty enough, not what enough? Probably everybody has. Do you have the want to carry forward? That's what it takes. And if you believe in you, God wouldn't have put it on your heart unless he believed in you.
Yeah, amen.
So go make it happen.
Amen. There you go. 2 life lessons from the Hayden Fry and the Iowa Hawkeye football team. I love it. Scott, how can everybody get a hold of you and get a hold of your books?
Well, you can get Get Second Chances will allow you to get second chances, the book.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, funny how that works. It's clever. You can go to TSWN book to get That Sucks What Now. Both really, I think, really solid reads. Will really make a big difference.
So.
Well, thank you. And if you have any questions for me, reach out to me at scott@scottschilling.com. I'd love to connect and create a relationship, and we go from there.
Well, there you go. Scott, we finally got you on the show, and I'm so glad we did. It was a pleasure being here with you today.
Oh, thanks, Michael. I really appreciate it.
All right. Take care.